Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Michelle Fondin, and I am here today on Ascension Sundays, and I am interviewing Wendy DeRosa. Wendy is the author of the new book, Becoming an Empowered Empath. And you can see with these tabs that I absolutely love this book. I've already marked it up so much. She's also the founder of the School of Intuitive Studies. She's been helping people develop intuition and experience personal transformation for over 2 decades. And she is a popular faculty member at the Shift Network and has filmed 2 programs for Mind Valley Spiritual Growth Channel. She lives in Colorado. Welcome, Wendy.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. It's great to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. And I know my viewers are super excited to hear about it because I know a lot of you out there are empaths. But what I really want to know, Wendy, is what is your definition of empath, and like how did you stumble upon it, and how would you explain it to someone who might be like, I don't know if this is me?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So, an empath is someone who feels the energy of other people or an environment in space through their sentient body. They have that experience of essentially feeling energy. And some empaths will have that experience of absorbing that energy into their body. And lots of people identify with being an empath because they're feeling overwhelmed by energy, or they are having a conversation with someone and the person walks away feeling great, and the empath is left feeling like they just took all their energy. Or sometimes empaths become very symptomatic with stomach aches and headaches, and sort of feeling an energetic overwhelm. And then certainly not just with individuals in individual relationships, but the collective. Empaths will often feel what's going on collectively in the world.
Yeah. And I know certainly that was my case. And I'm really interested in hearing your story because when I was reading your book, I realized like I was really sick as a kid, but highly empathic. Like I was always absorbing energy, but it manifested as physical symptoms. And I was really sick in my stomach growing up a lot of lower GI, but also like something I read in your story was about the throat chakra. Like I had like so many problems with the throat, like strep throat, tonsillitis, later mononucleosis, and then thyroid cancer. And it was at that point that I was like, there's something going on here. So those physical symptoms. But when did you realize you were an empath, and like what happened in your life that brought you to this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been an intuitive healer for 26 years, but it was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I started to understand that I was an empath. So all this time backing up into when I discovered I was intuitive, I would consider myself an intuitive healer. I still do. And I'll say a little more about this.
Oh, sure.
So back in childhood, I was overly sensitive. I could feel the energy of everybody in the family. I was the oldest girl of 8 children, and really took on a lot of responsibility at a young age, developed depression and anxiety, also a lot of strep throat, issues, different issues growing up as a child, eventually progressing to a nervous breakdown in my teens. And part of it was from the oversensitivity, the over responsibility, the energetic experience of that, and not really having a normal childhood experience, meaning not getting to be a child, a kid, or be my age. So I discovered, and I tell more about this in the book, but I discovered right around 19, 20 years old that I actually had a gift of intuition. And what I now have language for, which I didn't back then, was that I had all 4 clairs. I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant. And that, they relate to upper and lower body, which I can say in a minute. But ultimately, the empathic quality is the clairsentient sense. So that's the feeling sense that relates to clairsentience is so much about our lower chakras, our lower body, and specifically our second and third chakras, that we feel what's going on beneath the table. Well, I was when you're activated with energy and these power centers are absorbing everything that's going on around you, it certainly sends the rest of the system into haywire, affecting other clairs. And at the same time, they're also, they're getting stronger. They're showing signs. They're making their presence known. And so once I started to realize I'm an intuitive, I'm a healer, and this is something I can, utilize and step into my power and start to support people, it did start to refine in my body. But fast forward to several years ago, it really wasn't until, honestly, trauma erupted in the field in such a way that people were having such extreme experiences of being overly empathic. And I knew the chakra system. That was the foundation for so much of my work and my case studies and looking at people. And through my study and background and understanding the energetic system and relating it to what people were experiencing in the world, I started to realize, wow, there's a pattern here. There's an experience in the chakra system that's impacting how empaths are living in the world with or without boundaries.
Yeah, that's really cool that you said that. So did you feel like was it through your work with clients that you felt like people were all of a sudden in large amounts, like just taking on so much of the world's energy and other people's energy? Because you said there was like this big trauma response that you noticed.
Yeah, and I would say it's clients. There's a point at which I pivoted from private practice, so I have a lot of students for the school, so it's a lot of students and classes and big groups. I was teaching, and people are just sharing that they're having this similar experience. At the same time, you couldn't. We just couldn't exist in the past 4 or 5 years, certainly here in the United States, with politics, with civil rights issues, with human rights issues, with climate change, all the major issues that have been surfacing on the collective level. Like you can't not feel it. And people who may not even identify as an empath are having empathic experiences. And when I observe the energetic system, a person's energetic system, and can really recognize, wow, I can go right down into the lower chakras of their body and identify that there's patterns here as to why an individual soul isn't seated powerfully in that area of the body. And some of that is not because we don't want to. It's the chronic history of what our conditioning has been like that doesn't make it possible to really embody in those power centers because it wasn't accepted, and so we have to go back in and start healing these places in the body for, that level of presence and embodiment to happen.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. No, it's interesting that you said 4 years ago, because I tell the story in a recent video that after the 2016 elections, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I had always wanted to move to California. But after those elections, I felt an energy was pushing me out of DC, literally pushing me out. And I was like, I felt like this, I have to leave, I have to leave, I have to leave, I have to leave. And it was this crazy energy I could not explain. It was just, and again, it's that taking on of the collective energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's interesting for my audience out there is that it was around 2018 where there was an explosion of twin flames that became awakened to the spiritual journey, which would bring us around the 3-year mark, right? The 3 or 4 year mark. So that's another interesting concept. So let's go ahead. You mentioned the upper body and lower body intuition. Can you explain a little bit more? What does that mean?
Yeah, so we have upper chakras and we have lower chakras. We essentially have 8 chakra system that runs 7 embodied chakras that run along the spine, one of which is a little bit above the head, the crown chakra. And while we don't necessarily, separate them between upper and lower, there is a very distinct operating system between the upper chakras and the lower chakras. So The lower chakras relate to our horizontal human experience in the world. They also carry a lot of our soul's history. That includes what we might have come into this world with. And it also is going to include our imprinting based on whatever our childhood experiences are, our conditioning. That's lower chakra. So the lower chakras, the first, second, and third, are empathic. They relate to our empathic experience in the world. They're clairsentient power of intuition, and it's also the claircognizant sense of intuition, which is the knowing sense. People who know, they just know because they know because they know, and they can't explain why they know, they just know. That knowing sense sometimes relates to bodily sensations like chills or, oh, I just got a hit about that, or they'll be a very visceral experience in the body. The upper clairs, and the heart is sort of in between the two, but the upper clairs and the upper chakras very much relate to what we might call our psychic or medium experiences, like the seeing of pictures, the hearing of higher guidance, the sort of higher knowing, sort of spiritual awareness. That's upper chakra or upper clair experience in the body. For empaths, we certainly can have all of them going on. So it's just that the empathic experience very specifically relates to the lower chakras of the body. And that experience, whether we're embodied there or it's feeling out of control, can impact the upper clairs. And they certainly both can feel somewhat, I don't want to say out of control, because that sounds like it's a negative thing, but certainly when we have awakenings, it's a little out of control in the beginning, until it integrates, until we understand it, until we give it some time to, sort of be with it. And we start to gain more consciousness around it.
Yeah, I like that, because a lot of my viewers are experiencing a newness in spiritual awakening. And when I work with them one on one, many of them want to like rush through it. And I was like, you cannot rush through a spiritual awakening, even when you are balancing your chakras or becoming more aligned, becoming more centered. That takes time. It's just time and work and progress.
Yep, I agree.
I have a question about the lower chakras, because you mentioned, and maybe this would tie into spiritual bypassing, I don't know, but you had mentioned that sometimes if an empath has imbalanced lower chakras, the first three are totally imbalanced, and they tend to like live in the upper chakras without a balance or grounded set of the three lower chakras. It's this incredible imbalance, and they tend to absorb energy more from others. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, good. That was well said. So essentially, so let me say this. No, none of us, as spiritually progressing souls in the body, none of us want to be ungrounded or want to be in spiritual bypass. There's sort of, again, I want to be careful of the shaming we can do to ourselves along our spiritual journey. What's important to realize is that the lower chakras carry immense amount of conditioning that we were raised in. And some of that conditioning is from our family system, obviously, where we grew up. It's also informed by the collective system, what culture we were raised in, what were the bigger systemic sort of paradigms that were going on that influenced the family structure. So as sensitive beings, intuitive beings, we're coming to this body and we're born into that experience. And we are literally marinating in that energy and internalizing beliefs about ourselves based on what's mirrored, spoken or unspoken to us. Well, if I'm raised in an environment where I get it. It is not safe for me to be a woman. It is not safe for me to be, and this I'm speaking generally speaking here, but it's not safe for me to have the skin color I have. It's not safe for me to be the gender or whatever it might be. I get it deep down. It's not okay for me to be me. Then what happens in the body on a soul level is that the soul starts to migrate and lift up to the safer place in the body to exist, which is the upper chakras. And it disconnects from the innate core sense of safety, which is very root chakra. And that's our grounding connection. And literally, the chakra contracts. It says, contract. I'm going to live up higher. I'm now in a nervous system response of fight, flight, or freeze. And my spirit has elevated to higher consciousness so that I can survive. That's ungrounding. That's where we start to spiritually bypass. And that means we've disconnected from the presence of our lower chakras. That's what spiritual bypass really means. And it's a coping mechanism. We can thank that part of us for taking care of ourselves in that way when the intensity, the trauma, the childhood experience was just way more than we could process at the time. But our spiritual path takes us back down into the body, or the universe wakes us and shakes us so that we can get back down into our body, because it's sure enough, it sends us, our healing lessons that we need to know about. And we start to, as we take our awakened consciousness and ground back down into the body and do our healing work, we do become more grounded and integrated. And that's where we can really work with that healing, that spiritual bypass component.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I know a lot of people on the spiritual path want so much to reach the state of enlightenment and moksha, as it's mentioned in Sanskrit, which is like ultimate freedom. But what I've learned through my own spiritual journey that has been ongoing forever, it seems, but what I learned is that exactly what you were saying. It's not about moksha and freedom and living in higher states of enlightened consciousness. It's about taking what you know when you've experienced oneness and bringing it down to earth. Because you can't possibly be a light worker if you're living up in the ethers. You have to be down here where we're called to be.
Yeah, and my training is in the tantric lineage of yoga, which really teaches that the enlightenment, and it's not even the word to use, but that deeper connection of oneness is actually in the central channel of our body. So it's not about going up and out. It's about going deeper into the divine within the central channel of our body and accessing the power of our spiritual expansion that can happen as sort of householders, walkers on this path.
That's what BKS Iyengar wrote about too, is the fact that he's a householder. And so BKS Iyengar is, for everyone out there, is kind of like the father of modern yoga in the West, who brought over the concept of modern yoga in the West. But he wrote his books and talked about being a yogi as a householder, which is a more practical form of being a yogi and an enlightened being. That really leads me to talking about inner childhood work, because if many empaths out there are spiritual bypassing as a coping mechanism and not living in their lower chakras, what I was taught recently that I was a spiritual bypasser, that I needed to work on my inner child. And so can you explain, you talk about this and you do a beautiful exercise in your book to help get in touch with that inner child, but can you explain a little more about inner child?
The inner child in our body it's a consciousness, and it's like an archetype that lives inside us. It's very connected to our unmet emotional needs, or sometimes our met emotional needs. It's very connected to the emotional component. So as an adult, we can certainly seek connection or love, and we might want that from a partner, and we might get that from a partner, but it's not meeting the deeper need of the inner child, who ultimately needs it from ourself on a deeper level. For example, the inner child consciousness also is very related to the second chakra of the body, which is the emotional power center. It's the empathic, it's the intuitive, it's the ability to feel beneath the table and the subtle. And it's so interesting because when you think about spiritual bypass on this energetic level, it just means acceleration of consciousness in the upper body and a sort of a lifting up and out of the lower body. But when we start to tune into our inner child, specifically lower, tuning into what do you need, inner child? I'm tuning into you. That brings us back down into the second chakra and ultimately the grounding element of our body to be able to receive the answer from that question, but also the medicine, the energy medicine that happens when we do connect to the inner child.
That is amazing. And, that is something honestly that I didn't know existed. And I think it's so helpful to the viewers out there who, especially, I think as sensitive souls, we tend to look for validation in relationships outside of ourselves. And it's that constant reaching. And like I find my validation, I find myself in a relationship to others where I think the reconnection to the inner child in that second chakra, as you mentioned, is finding that relationship within first and finding.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
the second part that really spoke to me that has to do with that type of grounding in the lower chakras is how to properly ground yourself and like what kind of we're taught about grounding. And you take a really a different approach. It's just a slight variation, but I really liked it. So can you talk a little bit more about like grounding yourself to the earth as an empath?
Sure. So grounding is the experience of connecting to the earth's frequency, and literally it's through the soles of our feet, like walking on the earth or being immersed in nature itself, and its natural biocurrents and healing properties that are in nature. Energetically, we can ground ourselves literally. And the image that I like to use, so sometimes grounding cords have been depicted as the skinny cord from the tailbone down into the center of the earth. And what I've offer to everyone, all my students, everybody, is that we widen the image and allow it to secure the sides of the hips, the low belly and low spine, sort of like the pelvic bowl, and creating this tree trunk image that allows the roots to grow deep into the earth, creating a greater sense of security and also that healthy energetic transference of nurturing and safety and trust as powers that come from the center of the earth that can start to fuel the base of our body and invites us as souls to take a deeper seat inside ourselves.
That's amazing. Being from someone who like does live in the ethers a lot. That's just me. That was really helpful. And I think that part of that, like you said too, is physically walking on the earth with bare feet or lying down on the sand or by bodies of water or even, just where you're feeling that earth energy moving through you. I think it's great. But I love that. So now in my meditations, I'm doing the tree trunk and literally like feeling my hips grounded to the earth because that's so much more helpful for me to ground myself in my own practices. Which leads me to another discovery through your book is the back body. Now, I wrote a book on the chakras. How did I not know this? Can you please explain it to me?
So, so we do have, it's not, the energetic anatomy is not taught in school. We don't grow up with it immersed in our anatomy discussion. But the front body is the front side of the chakra system is very much it's essentially our ego consciousness. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it's our affect in the world. It's how we engage with the experience of life. It's through the front of the third eye, the front of the throat that we express. It's through the front of the belly that we feel, and we're sort of connecting, etc. So we have this front body consciousness. The back side of the body, which includes the back of the chakras, it's our receptivity from the divine into our spiritual connection. So it's essentially our sourcing. It's our introverted nature. So we close our eyes and we lean back and we can receive. I like the visual of the shower of light or waterfall of light through our back body to allow the backside of the chakras to receive from that waterfall of light, which then balances the excessive activity in the front side into the back, like literally moves the energy a little bit back into the back body. So we're a little more centered in the consciousness of ourselves. And I love this. I mean, for empaths, and I say this for teachers and parents and caregivers and everyone out there who has to be in your front body and give and give and give. It's very important that we engage the back body, the shower of grace daily in our lives. And you can do it while you're, I think I used to work with a lot of school teachers or therapists, a lot of therapist clients. As you allow in the back of your mind this shower of grace into the back body, sourcing yourself as you're being with others, it is a game changer in energy transfer. It's the way that our energy body can stay centered and aligned, and we're not giving out so much of the personal energy through the front body.
That makes so much sense. I absolutely loved that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So if you're out there listening, you need to replenish yourself with that shower of grace in your back body. And I even think the good visual is like when you're taking a shower, just imagine that as a shower of light, the divine's showering over you.
Yeah.
Because that's like another visual if you're a more visual person. How can an empath stop either bleeding energy out into others or taking on the energy of others? What are some things that they can do to stop that process?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. One is there's energy management. The other part is there's deeper healing. The deeper healing means that there is the need in the lower chakras to heal the blocks, the imprints, the wounded parts that are keeping the embodiment from being possible, because our boundaries and presence comes from radiance. But if we're only radiating from the upper body and we're not embodying and grounding and radiating from the lower body, then we're still recreating the pattern of, radiance up here, but I'm still absorbing down here. And so to not leak energetically or lose power energetically, it's grounding, it's embodying, it's healing the powers of the lower chakras, it's allowing for spiritual connection to be through the central channel of the body as opposed to up and out. It's about sourcing the back body. So there's a lot of these pieces. I do go further into the book around what to work with in the energetic system. I think a really common tool is this bubble of light, like put a bubble of light around us and walk out into the world. And it is a tool. It works, actually. It's great. It can come in very, very handy, certainly in moments when we need it. It doesn't replace the shift in the deeper patterns, though. So as we are healing and inherently our wounds in our lower body, which I go further into the book, we are creating space for more presence and radiance. That takes up space and has us contain our energy in a more aligned and centered way. And then we can allow from that radiance, that bubble of light around us, to work in tandem with the radiance. So of course, obviously, if you need it, throw a bubble of light around you. Like, don't poo-poo that. It works. It's just that it won't work to shift the long-standing pattern.
Exactly. One of my greatest mentors, Dr. David Simon, who was the co-founder of the Chopra Center, he always used to teach, you can do all the meditation in the world, but if you don't do internal emotional healing, it will all be for naught. Like, you have to do that stuff too. So that leads me to our last question. I could talk to you forever, but I honor your time. Most empaths have had tragic circumstances growing up. That's just, I don't know how our soul chooses this, but we choose to have very tragic circumstances. When I coach a lot of the viewers out there, when I coach my students, a lot of them are still kind of stuck in that victim mindset. How would you suggest that they start to get out of that victim mindset and into empowerment?
So victim in us is an aspect of the wounded feminine. And victim means powerless. Victim means I was trapped in my experience and I didn't have a way out. Victim means that there's an inner child inside that needs a lot of love and attention and validation for their experience. So the way that we heal the wounded feminine in us is that we start to tune into the second chakra, the inner child, and start to validate that part of us. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, your feelings were appropriate. And I'm going to let you have a tantrum right now. And you get to laugh and scream and cry and kick and dance and do whatever you want in your body right now, inner child. And I'm going to let you have that power back. And when we start to give the inner child consciousness in our lower body permission to be their authentic way of being, they shift from powerless debilitation into, I can own how I feel. I can own my presence. I can shift my patterns, or I can say no to this person. The powerlessness pattern comes from, and the victim comes from being deeply hurt. And we can recreate, I'm getting hurt and I'm getting hurt, and I keep recreating getting hurt and stuck in this cycle. But the way that we shift it is by again turning to the inner child, acknowledging the hurt, validating that the inner child's feelings are relative, they're valid, they are truthful, they're important, giving the inner child all the teachings that the inner child didn't get. And that moves that needle from powerlessness victim into, oh yeah, here I am, I'm in myself, I can, this is how I feel, and I'm going to stand by myself. And that's how we start to shift that consciousness. That's
Right.
one piece anyway.
It includes, of course, being able to verbally express your feelings, as well as setting healthy boundaries, which in the subtitle, it's how to clear energy, set healthy boundaries, and embody your intuition. So, Wendy, I want to thank you so much. You can find Wendy at the School of Intuitive Studies, which it will be right here. You can see it. .com. You can pick up Wendy's book. I'm going to put the links below, but you can find it pretty much anywhere, right, Wendy?
Yes, you can find it anywhere. And I actually also have my own website, wendyderosa.com. Either one of them, School of Intuitive Studies or Wendy DeRosa, you can find the book in both places.
Perfect. Guys, I would highly encourage you to get this book. It really was a game changer for me. I felt that in this book, it was like Wendy was speaking my language as an empath. So I want to thank you once again, Wendy, for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
You're very welcome. Thank you guys for subscribing to my channel below. Click on that bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thanks for giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this video with other twin flames, empaths, and light workers. And thank you guys so much for joining me on this Sunday, and I'll see you guys in the next video.